Hi, this is Hanno the Hunter Mäkinen, and I promised something more entertaining this week, so excuse me, princess, but it's time to review all 13 episodes of the Legend of Zelda cartoon series. And let's start off with The Ringer, the pilot episode, and this is a really good opening episode. Naturally, it has pretty good animation quality, as tends to be the case with the pilots of animated series. It has one of the closest calls to a kiss that Link and Zelda ever have in the series, already in the first episode, which is actually kind of depressing. But Link also fights a fucking dragon. How many times does that happen in the first episode of a cartoon? And you know, the plot is this basic sort of schlock you'd expect in a normal Zelda episode, but it's really entertaining, and the animation quality is so crisp. There's only one thing in the episode that I think is kind of stupid. It's when Ganon is escaping with the four Stalfos carrying him on the throne, and Link says, "We'll never catch him now." What? Link can't run faster than Stalfos? Or they can't just go to the stables and get a horse or something? But anyway, a really good episode to kick off the series. I give this 2.5 Triforces out of 3. Next up, Cold Spells. It's a classic cartoon plot this time. Link pretends to be sick in order to not have to do any housework around the castle. My favorite part of this episode is when sprite magic goes all haywire and everything goes crazy. And it also has an appearance by the Goma, which is pretty awesome. In fact, the only thing that's really annoying about this episode is that Ganon gets away with the Triforce this time because Link is basically being an ass. But it's an entertaining episode. I give it 2 Triforce pieces out of 3. Next up, it's the White Knight, and this is a really good episode, again, because in this one, Zelda falls head over heels for this really handsome prince called Prince Facade. And as it turns out, Prince Facade really lives up to his name. He doesn't want to get dirty, even when fighting monsters. This obviously gets Link really jealous, and because of that we get a hilarious scene where he puts up a gay getup. But even more hilarious in my view is the scene where he takes a bath. Actually, I think the scene where he fights the Armus and the Octorok for a rupee was even more funny. And yes, those are supposed to be Armuses, even though they don't look like it. And at the end, we even have an appearance by Zora. Anyway, it's a really cute episode that displays what Zelda and Link's relationship is really like. And because of that, I really enjoy it, and I'm going to give it 2.5 Triforce pieces out of 3. Go check it out. Next up is Kiss and Tell, and despite its silly title, this is actually a pretty good episode. Again, those of you who've been watching this video so far thinking that I'm just praising all the episodes, don't worry, we'll get to some pretty bad ones in a moment. But I mean, how can you not love this? It starts off with the Gleeok at the very beginning. Link saves this really hot babe from the Gleeok, kisses her, and turns into a frog. Oh yeah, and the girl also turns into a Gibdo. But this is some serious character drama. I know it's taken from a classic fairy tale and all that stuff, but Link is just genuinely devastated by this transformation. And Sprite's of course terrified because he's a frog now and he'll just eat up any fly or anything else with wings that happens to be nearby. You might think you know where this episode is going, and I'm not going to spoil it for you because this is such a good episode. I think you need to see this for yourself, and I'm actually giving it 2.5 Triforce pieces out of 3. Watch it all the way to the end, you're gonna love it. Next up we have an episode with giants, ninjas, and Ganon on a fucking unicorn! Yes, it's Sing for the Unicorn, my absolute favorite episode from this series. Because of that, I don't even want to really discuss this episode because I don't really want to spoil it for anybody. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. It's action-packed, it's got some really funny stuff in it, it has some genuine peril for one of the main characters. No surprise here that it gets a full 3 Triforces out of 3. Alright, next up is That Sinking Feeling, and this was an okay episode. I mean, it starts great. I mean, Zelda comes this close to actually giving Link a kiss. And I'm not exaggerating, that bitch just throws herself on Link at the very beginning. But of course, they get attacked by Tektites and she doesn't get to kiss him. I have to say, the Tektites, for being such lame Zelda bad guys, they actually get a pretty epic fight scene at the beginning. Ganon, on the other hand, has a really lame plot up his scheme involving a giant magnet that pulls things underground. I mean, the writing of this episode is really shaky. It gets kind of really stupid in places. Yet at the same time, there are a few kind of funny moments in it. I really felt conflicted about the Darknut's long-awaited appearance. I mean, it's my favorite Zelda monster, but he looks kinda ridiculous. But at least there's a wizard's duel between Zelda and Ganon, and the ending gag is kind of funny. I think this one has enough entertainment value that it would stand on its own, but it's not really one of my favorite episodes, so I'm giving this one only 1.5 Triforce pieces out of 3. Next up, it's Doppelganger, and if you've never watched a cartoon before in your life, you better get that German dictionary out. But the rest of you know, of course, that somebody's getting cloned. And who could it be? Of course, it's Zelda, and she gets an evil, hot clone of herself. One that really enjoys making out with Link. It's a sort of episode that just writes itself. But I have to say, it has a few really funny highlights, such as Link whistling the Mario tune at the very beginning. But it also has some really dumb moments, like at the very beginning, Ganon's nefarious plan of the day is sending one Moblin with 2 boomerangs after Link. But I'll give Link some credit here because he actually figures out that it's not the real Zelda when they suddenly head to the underworld with the Triforce of Wisdom at the middle of the night. So it's not a great episode, but it's pretty entertaining, and I gotta say, the Dark Zelda is pretty fucking hot. So I'm gonna give this 2 Triforce pieces out of 3. Next up, it's Underworld Connections, and if you've ever lost sleep over thinking whether or not Link actually wears heart-shaped boxers, well, there's your answer. But hey, the plot to this one is actually pretty neat. A bunch of liars blow up the Triforce of Wisdom into 3 parts. 2 of them end up in the underworld, and Link and Zelda have to go find them. Kinda like in the game. This one has an appearance by the Aquamentus of all creatures, and Link goes flame surfing. So it's actually a pretty awesome episode, except I felt that it was repeating so many things that we've already seen in the prior episodes. Didn't really bring anything new to the plate, so I'm only going to give this one 2 Triforce pieces out of 3. It's a really good, entertaining episode, but not really outstanding. Next up, it's Stinging the Stinger, and you can tell from the tone of my voice that I'm not very excited about this one. Okay, so Link getting suckered into exchanging his sword for a brand new shiny one that's completely useless is kind of an interesting story point, but come on. Would you buy a used car from this guy? What I hate about the singer is that he even has the balls to try and haggle with Ganon over Link's sword. And he actually does it until he finally realizes, oh wait, I'm the bad guy. I'm gonna throw you in my dungeon. But you know what? The episode does have some redeeming values. There's another appearance by the Goma, and Ganon's actually defeated by a bunch of bees, which is pretty hilarious. But I do have to level with you. The writing on this episode was pretty pathetic, and it's especially evident with this one line.
When magical means will not suffice, use natural means as your device.
You mean, like, bugs and stuff?
I don't really recommend watching this episode, but if you're curious, it's kind of funny in a sort of sucky kind of way, so I'm giving it 1 Triforce piece out of 3. Next up, it's A Hitch in the Works, and this episode begins again with Zelda forcing Link to do chores around the castle. You'd think she would have learned after cold spells.
I'm a hero, not a handyman.
Whoa, who do you think you are, McCoy? Now, this is an episode that's really torn between some really stupid stuff and some really, funny stuff. On the stupid stuff, there's a Link doing the Tarzan yell. There's a really stupid dance that the Moblins do when they succeed in this episode. There's a really crappy-looking fake Moblin that the guy who makes medieval robots does. But I think my absolute worst thing that I hate about this episode is when Ganon says this.
Once I place this jewel of control around her neck, the princess will do anything I say. Even marry me!
He wants to marry Zelda? Since when? Okay, I know that in cartoons, the villains kind of tend to lose their goals at some point, but come on! But you know what? I don't care what your stance is on medieval robots. You might hate it, you might like it, but that's the fucking Grim Reaper at their fake wedding in the underworld. This episode's kind of weird. I don't really know what to make of it. It has its funny points, but it has some really painfully stupid points. So I'm gonna give this 1.5 Triforce piece out of 3. Fairies in the spring. Oh my god. We get off to a pretty rocky start when Zelda scolds Link for stepping on a flower. What else can I say? It's about King Harkinian building a water park in Hyrule. Which means if you've ever wanted to see Zelda characters in swimwear, well, there's your chance. I honestly don't think this was necessary, and if it weren't for Zelda's little boob crack here, this whole thing wouldn't have been worth it. Is there anything good about this episode? Because Ganon's not even in this one. Well, I actually thought the underwater battle scenes were kinda nice. But it's hands down the worst premise for a Zelda episode, and I have to give this one Triforce piece out of 3. Finally, we come to the second to last episode of the series, The Missing Link, and this one is pretty fucking epic. Because it's where Link dies! But his spirit is left back and helps Zelda along, so it's not that bad. Okay, so he didn't really die. His body was transported to the evil jar, but his soul was left behind. And only Zelda can see him. Sprite and the other characters can just hear his voice. By the way, just a little weird point. Doesn't it look like Link is about to flick Sprite here? And I love the little moments like Link trying to tell Zelda how to use his sword. And when he actually breaks open the evil jar and a pink tidal wave washes over Ganon and the other villains. I have to say, this would have been the perfect episode to end with Link and Zelda finally kissing, because they make such a big deal about the fact that Zelda can only see Link because she's in love with him. And it would have been such an awesome way to bring this episode to a close. It would have come so close to getting 3 Triforce pieces out of 3, but they had to ruin it with this one completely retarded moment.
Zelda loves me! Zelda loves me!
Shut up, you idiot! He'll hear you!
Zelda loves me! Zelda loves me!
But I do have to give this one 2.5 Triforce pieces out of 3. This episode started really promising. It's a really good episode overall, but they could have finished it much better. Okay, the final episode of the series, Moblins Are Revolting. It's kind of a shame that the final episode of Zelda has to be such a lol fest, but on the other hand, it's always fun to see an episode that's clearly written for comedic purposes alone. So basically, Ganon gets trapped inside a magic bubble, and all of his henchmen decide that they're gonna take over Hyrule Castle. But their attack attempts are made of massive fail. I mean, you actually feel sorry for the leader Moblin, because he starts to realize, you know, why Ganon is always so freaking angry with them. Really, the only part of this episode that I didn't like is when Ganon finally comes back and he brings all his henchmen back, and because they've completely messed up his throne room, he tells them to clean it with their tongues. I mean, what? Okay, not an outstanding episode to go out on, but pretty freaking funny. I give this 2 Triforce pieces out of 3. Go check it out. This wraps up this review. I hope you enjoyed it. See you on the next video, whatever it might be.